Hello, welcome to Power Fridays Live, and I am your host, Janelle Pulley, and my co-host here.
Dave Goresso, good to be here again. Happy
Great.
Friday to you both.
Happy Friday, Dave. And Isha Killian, thank you for joining us this evening. We're super excited to have you here representing for Women's Month this March 10th, 2023.
Thank you for having me. Hi, David. Hi, Janelle.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hello, Isha. And I am so excited about this conversation tonight because it is all about you and you being a mental health and wellness advocate, a speaker, ordained minister, and you're also an author from Long Island, New York. Please do share with us more about your inspiring life and how it is being an associate minister in the AME Church.
Ooh, those are a lot of questions and a lot of things to talk about. Yes, I have all of these roles in life. I'm also a mother of two beautiful children. My daughter, she's 27. My son, he is 17. My daughter, she's lives in Atlanta, Georgia. She went to Spelman College, and my son is receiving his college acceptances, and one of them is Morehouse College. So I'm very excited about where my children are and how they are doing in life. What else? Also, about myself is a new role that I took on as a learning coordinator at the seminary that I graduated from. I'm just recently in April with my master's in theological studies. It's for a grant by Eli Lilly. It's a grant to help pastors with their emotional health. You know, pastors who are always giving out to people, they don't think of themselves. So we're giving them a space to make sure that they take care of themselves and that they focus on their emotional health. So we actually have an opportunity this summer to go to Ireland. So I'm going to be going 7 days, 6 nights to Ireland with the pastors for a retreat of relaxation, meditation, and all that. So those are all the things that I am doing for now. Let's see, what else did you ask me?
So, how thank you so much for sharing that. It sounds amazing. And Eli Lilly is a great company, and I'm happy to learn that they are actually giving money and donating grant money to uh, faith-based organizations.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, there are several grants they're giving out to seminaries and specifically to seminaries that are helping people with mental health and self care. So that's something that they're really focusing on. So that's good to know.
Okay, great. And so, how did you come about a journey in the mental health realm? And in your way that you grew up, what was it that had you say, "Hey, mental health field, that is what I'm more passionate about, and that's what I'm being drawn to."
Absolutely. So I'm a mental health and wellness advocate because I was looking at the statistics. I think it's like about 1 in 5 adults struggle with mental illness. About 450 million people struggle with it all over the world. And as a Black woman of faith, I understand the importance of speaking about your mental health because there's such a stigma and shame surrounding talking about your feelings, especially as a woman of color. And then, most definitely, in the face spaces, speaking about times where you may feel depressed or anxious. Because people don't want to be stigmatized. They don't want to be ostracized for having feelings that are not just joy. The joy of the Lord is our strength. That is something that I totally believe as a believer in Christ. However, situations, circumstances, life happens, and people may be going through something that is hurting them, and they have to be honest about what's going on with them because you cannot heal what you do not address and do not talk about. So the reason why I'm a mental health and wellness advocate is to talk about and to really dispel the myths about mental illness, to dispel the stigma about mental illness, and also because I think there's so many people who are suffering in silence because they haven't had a space, or they haven't felt like it was something that they could share with people without feeling that they were not going to be part of the community. And as a woman who is a high functioning individual, of the things that I've experienced in my life, I have been, and I still struggle with mental illness, specifically depression and anxiety. And because of the fact that I have um, been very transparent and vulnerable about what I've gone through, and I'm not ashamed of it, I know that I can help other people. Because and I use this analogy many times when I'm speaking to other groups. If someone had a broken ankle or a broken leg, we wouldn't say, just walk it off or just pray about it. We would say, go to the doctor, right? So the same thing is with your mental health and your emotional well-being. It's important that we take care of our bodies. People of faith may feel like you can compartmentalize something, your spiritual life, and it doesn't affect your emotional well or your physical health. And we are holistic beings. We're human beings that everything is intricate, right? So we're holistic. Everything works together. So you can't just deny one part of yourself and think that your other parts of yourself are going to work well. It's not. That's not how we are designed. That's not how God made us. So I think it's important that people are honest about what they've gone through. They know that there is help, that mental illness, mental health, and wealth is not just a color thing. It's not that like only white people are have mental illness. Not only white people go to therapists. There are many people. Let's see, probably in the last 10, 15 years, who are speaking out about their journey with, struggling with problems, struggling with how they're feeling depressed, anxious, being, traumatized, and the ramifications of all that trauma. So it's important that people take care of themselves and they do the work to heal. Because
Yeah.
I think I read like a quote that said, like, your wound may have not been your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. So no matter what's happened to you in your life, it's your responsibility to heal from it. So you're not supposed to stay in the rut. You're not supposed to stay in grief. You're not supposed to stay in depression, anxiety. You are designed to come out of it and do what it takes in order to heal. So that's why I'm a mental health and wellness advocate.
And thank you so much for sharing that. Go ahead, Dave.
It's funny, Janelle. You read my face now. You already no. I actually appreciate everything you said, and ironically, right about 2, 3 years ago, I actually started going to see a counselor to deal with anxiety because that is something that I struggle with. And sometimes if I don't deal with it, it'll take me into the pit of depression. But I talked to a colleague at the time who happens to be a person of color, and he told me everything that you just said. And I was like, really? Like, I was actually a little bit shocked by it because I don't have an issue sharing that stuff. Like, I'm not afraid of it. And to your point, like we have a flesh side, right? We also have a spirit and a soul. And if you really start looking at the division between all three, why is it so shocking that in the spirit we're saved, but the flesh is still dealing with stuff, right? Like, and to your point, like you wouldn't look at somebody who broke their leg and just walk it off. The joy of the Lord is our strength, right? Like,
Right.
it almost
Exactly.
makes me laugh. But here's the thing that I would ask you about too, because I think it's a big step to go seek counseling for issues like this. But one thing I feel like maybe is missing sometimes is a community of others that are dealing with this, so that there's a continuous process of working through those issues. What would you advise others out there that are currently struggling to tap into those communities? And if they do exist, please share, how do we get tapped into that?
Yeah, actually, I mean, there are several organizations, not several, but there are many organizations, especially during the pandemic, that really spoke about their services, because people were isolated. people, they were literally quarantined. And so they started to feel very isolated and alone. So there are different programs and different organizations. The National Association for Mental Illness, NAMI, that's one. And they actually have several different chapters throughout the country where they have groups. If you want to, and they have resources for where you can find a therapist. Therapy is not only just psychiatry, it's also psychology, working with a social worker. So there's many modes of therapy that someone can go to, and it's based on what the person may need. There's also for the Black community or people of color, there's Black Mental Health. I think that's on Instagram, and they have resources where you can click in and find a therapist if you're looking for a therapist of color. Also, there's those telehealth that's on Instagram. Like I think it's talk therapy. What is it? I think it's BetterHelp. Those are the ones that
Mhm.
are provided to give people those opportunities where you can do a search. It's like a search engine, and you could say, I want my therapist to be a woman. I want her to, be able to speak, that, she can speak Bengali. Like you can really customize who your therapist is. And the insurances that people have now are days, like 20 years ago there was like a high copay, or there wasn't even, your insurance wasn't even taking care of that for mental health. Now
Mhm.
these, insurances are pretty comprehensive, and you can go to your weekly session, and then you have to pay your copay. You may have to do like a co-insurance in the beginning of the year, or something like a spin down, but there are opportunities. Now if you do not have insurance, or there's, you need to be able to, like with community, well, I'm in New York, so there's, I think it's called the Marketplace, New York City State of Health, where there are free or reduced cost mental health services. Let's see. Yeah, so there's several things. I would have to look and make a list, but yeah, there's several different opportunities and resources for people. If you're looking for it, you can just Google it and you will find it, and it will connect you to an organization or a service that you don't even have to pay for if you don't want. Now, communities of people who are struggling with mental health, you can find that on Facebook. You can really connect with people. That's what a lot of people were doing throughout this pandemic, and being able to have a healthy support system is one of the keys to your healing journey. When I speak about my own healing journey, I really take that into consideration as something that is really key to my well-being, my daily well-being. Do I have people in my life who can support me, that I can trust? So that's important. So yeah, Facebook. Now, when you join these groups, you have to be mindful that you are not, these people may not be licensed, but it's important that you do go to someone who's licensed, because a person who is licensed, they're licensed to listen to you. They're licensed to help guide you to learn how to take care of yourself. So that's what I have to share with my resources. There's several things out there, and definitely, if you have questions and you have insurance, you can go look on the back of your card, and it will give you a number, and then you can speak to someone.
Thank you for sharing that, Isha. And I want to encourage anyone who's watching or listening to this, if you're struggling with it, please go seek help. I'm telling you, I speak from experience. That person that I'm working with, or that community, has always been able to help me through those things. And I'm grateful for those times in my life where I've struggled and I've had that support system to go through it. So thank you for sharing all those resources. Um, Isha, there was a slightly different direction I wanted to go with this. I'm a faith-based purpose coach. And so one thing that I notice, right, is that when we aren't functioning inside of the purpose for which God called us, then that seems, when it comes to mental health, that in my past has tended to bring me down and deal with more of that anxiety, more of the depression. And just been paying more attention lately and noticing that when others are kind of in that same space, they're doing things in their life that maybe don't align with God's purpose. I can see the struggle. Like, is that something that you see in your space as well? And what advice would you offer in situations like that?
That's a good question. Yeah, there would be definitely frustration if anyone believes that, God has called them to a certain task or an assignment that they have to fulfill, whether it's, speaking and they don't feel like they can do that, or they're too shy or something like that, or writing a book. I'm talking to myself, writing a book, or going back to school, or anything that they're doing, well, anything that they feel that God, Holy Spirit is telling them to do, and they're not seeing any progress. Of course, it's going to lead to have some frustration. And I believe that if you just take one step, God is going to take another step and step and step. And that's what's been my experience. Like, as I look back over my life, I'm going to be 45 in May. And when I came to the Lord about 25 years ago, I didn't see myself where I am. And it's recently, in the past maybe 2, 3 years, that the experiences that I've had are they're coming together, and they were for a purpose. Not everything was great, but I have these experiences because I have to have the wisdom to be able to help other people. So if someone is feeling that, they're not where they want to be, I just ask you just to look at what it is that where you want to be. Do all of those personal development steps, like write out your goals, seek the Lord. If you are a believer in Christ, seek the Lord for direction, and then ask for the steps to be like minimized, so you can say, okay, this is what I'm going to do next, this is what I'm going to do next. But of course, whenever we see something so big and we don't see any progress, there's going to be some frustration that could lead to depression and anxiety. And then also, Theodore Roosevelt says, comparison is the thief of joy. Like, if you're looking at your brother and you're looking at your sister and they're doing something and you're not doing it, and you wish you had this, you're always going to feel like you are not where you're supposed to be, or what you want to do and where you want to be. So I just suggest that you just take it to God. You ask for direction, ask for wisdom, and ask for blinders, so that you don't be discouraged. And if you feel like you are not feeling your best, and you feel like, you have no desire to do certain things, you're not really interested, and you're, feeling this way for about 2 weeks or more, that's when you should definitely go seek a healthcare professional. That's very important. And then they will do more of the screening for you to see, what mood disorder that you may have, or maybe not, or, whatever it is. But just make sure you take care of yourself. We are created by God, and we are responsible to take care of our bodies. And if we do not, then we're not really doing what we should be doing.
Absolutely. I love how you talked about how the comparison there, because that one has gotten me many times. I'm sure we've all experienced some of
Yes.
that,
Yes.
especially if you tend to be performance driven, right? Like I've struggled with that, and it's easy to kind of compare. Well, I'm not performing as well because we only see with this, right? We don't really know what God's doing in the background. Another thing I wanted to bring up, right, is this idea of how especially when we talk about entrepreneurialism, right? Because we bring a lot of entrepreneurs onto this podcast.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that we celebrate often, and to an unhealthy level, is we fill our calendars with so many things that it's just taxing to the brain, and context switching from thing to thing to thing all day. I think that weighs us down too, on multiple levels, right? Spiritually and just physically in general. What would you say about how to better manage the time and not overwork ourselves, especially the entrepreneurs that are listening?
Right. So I am not an entrepreneur and I'm proud of it. I mean, yes, I'm an author. I have some, I've written in a book, co-authored a book. I write blogs and things like that. And I'm also working on my book, which should be coming out. I'm not even going to say the date, but I'm working on it, right? And then speaking, that's like an entrepreneurial endeavor. However, I have a career. I have a career of over 25 years in the nonprofit management administration. And it's a very lucrative career. And then I told you about my other role with the seminary, and then being a single mother of two. I have a calendar. I have a calendar, and I put everything in the calendar. I put hanging out with friends in the calendar. I put like church services in the calendar. I put like video podcasts that I want to watch in the calendar. That's what I do. Like I have to have some, you have to organize your day, or it's just going to get away with you. You have to organize your week, or it's going to get away with you. Your month, your year, you have to set your goals. So if anyone is feeling overwhelmed or overworked, take care of yourself. Like I am a strong advocate for take care of yourself, because if you are an entrepreneur, and same thing if you have a career and you have a job, if you run yourself ragged, if you don't take care of yourself,
Mhm.
you don't listen to your body, then something's going to happen. God
Mhm.
forbid you're in the hospital. If you're working at a job or you have a career, um, and God forbid something happens and you're not there anymore, they may take what, 2, 3 weeks, or and then they're like, okay, get your stuff and move you out, and we're looking for somebody else. So make sure you take care of yourself and you listen to your body. I believe that a lot of the problems in Black and Brown communities and people, of color, we are very performance driven, right? Like you were saying. And a lot of that has to do with some powers that be. And we want to prove our worth, and we want to prove that we are good and valuable. But I don't subscribe to that anymore. I mean, I have 3 degrees. Um, I've overcome a lot of statistics. The statistics would have not said that I would have had a college degree, let alone 2 master's degrees. Um, and I was running not just because I wanted to prove my worth, but because I wanted something better for myself and for my family. But people can get really tripped up on that and really forget the main thing. And the main thing is God and loving your neighbor and loving yourself. And you have to make sure that you take care and love yourself. Because if you don't love yourself, then you're not going to really be able to love anybody else. So I really think it's important that as entrepreneurs that they do the work, whatever that is, to heal from traumas, like figure out what it is that they're doing. If they have their hands in 50 million pots, how are you really effective? Like know your niche and take care of that, and then you will be happier because you will be dedicated and focused on the things that you should be dedicated and focused on.
That so I mean, those of you listening, you may have heard stuff like that before, but that's gold, right? Seriously, I want to make sure that we stop, pause, and take that in, because I'm telling you, everything Isha just said is 100% spot on. We cannot be effective at life in general unless we're taking care of ourselves and doing the self-care that we need to do. And too many times we are pushed into this mindset that we have to perform to keep up with everything else that's going on out there, and we don't know how to just take a break, just
Right.
be. We're human beings, not human
Yeah.
doings, right?
Doings. Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
a couple quick questions, just because I realized we have a couple commonalities. So I'm working on a book too. I understand that whole thing about don't tell them a date. I made that mistake before. Don't say the
Yes.
date. But what is your book going to tell us a little bit more about what it involves?
So the name of my book, and I'm also trademarked, No Shame Here. And it's about overcoming shame. So a lot of the book is about my experiences. And then also because of my experiences and my journey of healing, I wouldn't say overcoming, but in the space of healing, that's what I'm
Mhm.
sharing, the wisdom, the nuggets that I've learned about how to overcome shame. And really, shame at its core is about your identity. People sometimes they want to mix up shame and guilt. Shame is your identity, guilt is what your behavior. And shame is
Mhm.
wrapped up, is like a very visceral emotion that kind of tells you a couple of things. It shouts that you're not good enough, that you don't belong, and that there's really nothing for you, to be like you're there, you have no purpose. And so that happens from one of a couple of things, and I've experienced from my life was childhood
Mhm.
trauma. I've had early parental loss. I was an orphan at 5, and I really, my response, I had a lot of unaddressed grief. So my mom died when I was 5, to sickle cell anemia, a genetic blood disorder. And my grandmother, who is 99, she raised me, but she was going through her own grief. She just lost my mother, and before that, about 15 months before that, my grandfather, her husband. So she was really grieving, and she had to take care of this little girl. And then my response as a already shy girl was to, let me just stay to myself, not make any waves, try to be perfect, just stay under the radar. And because of all of that, I went through life just kind of, and I was speaking to one of my friends this weekend, saying, I was kind of lost because I didn't get an opportunity to address my grief. I didn't get a chance to really talk about my mother. I was afraid to talk about my mother. And I was saying also to the same friend that I didn't grieve my mother until I was in my 20s. And so having all of this stuff going on with me, and having the loss of, my parents at a young age, was really detrimental. And because of that, I started to feel depressed. I had a lot of anxiety. But when I felt called to ministry, when I felt like God was saying to share my story, I was like, what story do I have to share? What do I have to say? I don't have anything to say. And then over time, it was about writing. And I started to really feel like God was like saying, it's not depression and anxiety. There's a root, and the root is shame. And the root is shame. So I was like, shame, what's that? And so I started like doing the research about it. And I was understanding like, where does shame come from? Shame can be self-imposed, but it also can be external. So when I talk about shame, I'm talking about internal shame, but I'm also talking about the external shame that
Mhm.
happens from religious spaces. So as a minister, I also talk about some theologies and ideologies that have been harmful to people, that have made them feel ostracized, like especially purity culture, um, LGBTQ plus exclusion, as I am a Q plus ally. So I really address things like that because people are suffering, and they're suffering in silence. And so No Shame Here is about making sure that people do not suffer in silence, that they recognize that they're not the only ones, and that there are things that we can do so that we no longer have to feel ashamed.
Yes, and this month, in addition to being Women History Month, it is the National LGBTQ plus Health Awareness Week.
Oh,
And
really?
yes, so that's whenever I read your bio and you being a person that's sex positive, being a Christian woman, I was like, how does that work?
Yes, how that works is, yes, I am self-proclaimed body and sex positive womanist preacher, and I came to that label that I gave myself is because I, as a preacher, as a Black woman, I have always found, and I was always wondering why, when I was going to scriptures, even before, way before I was ordained, I was always looking at the I say characters, the characters out that are not the main characters in the pericope, which means like the story. I was always looking at like, okay, but what about that other person? What's going on with that person? Like, what did how did she feel? And a womanist preacher, or a person who's a womanist, is that they center women's stories. So like for Black women, I'm centering our stories. It's not just about what the status quo is. It's about what's going on in the lives of real people. And so being a body and sex positive is about not being ashamed of your body. Many of the Christian faith of there's, Christian context of saying, the body's evil. And people don't know this, but that thought came from like pretty much like philosophical thought in the 1800s. I mean, sorry, the 18th century, that divided our bodies, our souls, and our spirits and made it seem like that it was like evil. And that's not really the case. The case is God created us. We were part of creation. And when he created man and woman, he said it was very good. So I'm God's good creation. Everything about me, my mind, my soul, my body, everything. So that's what being sex positive and body positive is, and what that means for me.
Okay. And whenever we go back to the book of Genesis, and of course we know the story about Eve and the eating of the tree of life, the forbidden fruit, then they saw that they were naked. So does that have any correlation in how that come about in as far as being ashamed of yourself and your body whenever Adam and Eve went and hid themselves?
Yes, yes. And then we also have to know that, like in the book of Genesis, there are actually two creation stories. So we have to make sure that we understand that. There are two creation stories in the book of Genesis. And also knowing that, Eve is not the culprit, right? She was not really the one. It was Adam, because he was responsible for both of them. But I digress. That's the womanist preacher in me there. So yeah, about being naked and unashamed, and then by that time of making that statement, oh, they knew they were naked and then they were ashamed and then they covered and hid themselves. So yeah, definitely all about just uncovering and unlearning toxic thought and toxic theologies that have harmed people and made them feel like they are not enough and they're not good enough. And that's exactly what my goal is to do when I have opportunities to speak and preach.
So it's interesting too. You brought up identity, and I saw your comment there. Jaleesa jumped in, and she had talked about how shame kind of traps our identity. I was thinking the same thing that she was saying. Yeah, there it is. Thank you, Janelle. It says shame definitely keeps the fullness of our identity captive. But
Mhm.
going back to the Genesis story, right? It's interesting we bring this up because something just came up in conversation with my wife and I around this yesterday, and she brought that exact story up, and I actually responded the same way, Isha. I said, but it was Adam's fault because he was supposed to be taking care of it and he wasn't there. He wasn't
Oh,
present to do the duty that God gave him. However, Satan went after her because here's something that was just pointed out to me recently that was amazing. She wasn't called Eve until after the fall. So she didn't have her identity yet. So it's interesting to me that the enemy went after Eve before her identity was established to create the problem that was ultimately created when she fell. So what are your thoughts on that? That was kind of eye opening.
I hmm, I would need to let that ruminate a little bit more. Um, that's an interesting perspective.
mhm.
Yeah, I would have to take some more time to think about that. When it comes to the Bible, I there's a lot that people have done, and I want to be very careful in exegeting the text and not making sure that I'm putting, my spin on something. But I would definitely like to look into that and read it again before I make a comment. I'm learning
Yes.
to do that more.
Yes, because there's different versions, and that is why I believe that it's confusing sometimes because I listen to different sources and it's like, oh, wow, and learning different perspectives and then just having an unbiased approach to the word. That's awesome. And
Right.
Jaleesa says, wow, that's good. And I do love your story, and I do love the fact that you're telling your story and you're sharing the information. And when it comes to the way that you feel about your body, because in how even as a young woman growing up in the church, it was like, oh, you can't have sex before you get married. And it's like, well, where in the Bible does it say that?
Right.
But it's like all of these uh, ideology has come about as women are concerned. And then it takes me back to what you said something earlier, and it brought me back to the women in the Bible. When you had the Sarah and Hagar relationship, and
Mhm.
in that regard. And so I'm just like, how does all of these relationships as a woman of faith, and you're looking at the various communication that has been disseminated in the Bible, do you really bring forth those stories in such a way to where we do share that, hey, this was this is what God created, this is how God journeyed their life, and this is the result, and it's all rooted in choices. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It is definitely rooted in choices. With this Sarah and Hagar story, definitely looking at Hagar. What was her experience? Why is it, we do center it around Sarah, and we say, okay, well, she wanted the son, and she was feeling like, she wanted what she wanted, and then here she got it, and then she mistreated Hagar, and then of course Hagar felt like discarded. But then I believe Hagar was like the first to name God by saying, "This is where I see you, where God sees me." Um, that
Elroy,
yes,
Elroy, the
Elroy,
God who sees me, my
yes,
favorite.
yes, the God, where the God who sees me, and that really just tells you that God is close to the brokenhearted. God is close to those who are marginalized, the ones who have been discarded and um, shamed. So that's really important to me, to see those relationships, the ones that are not lifted up, the ones that are in the background. And I think that's really what we have to see when we look at the Bible. We're looking at reading the Bible. We cannot, and I've been telling people lately, you cannot put a 21st century spin on the Bible and read it. You have to understand that this is a book that books, several 66 books that were written to a certain period, at a certain period of time, and especially Paul's letters to a certain group of people for a reason, to either remedy something, to address something. So you can't really put prescriptions on what we're going through now in every context. And some of the Bible is
Mhm.
descriptive. So you cannot do that. It's very irresponsible to do that. And that's how a lot of people have been hurt by doctrines and dogma, because they've just not have irresponsibly not exegeted the text, which means looking at the history, looking at who wrote it, who they were writing to, and what was the reason. So that's also a lot about the ministry that God has called me to, which is called biblical criticism. It's understanding that the Bible is sacred, but you cannot just put your spin on it, because it changes lives. So if you have the wrong spin, you can manipulate it, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to continue to do that, because that's what has harmed people.
Yeah, and the one thing that I thought too, just to add on to that, is it was written from an Eastern culture mindset, right? We're in a very westernized culture, so culturally speaking too, and back in that time, it's really hard sometimes to understand the context from which they're coming from. And I want to share this because I think it kind of makes the point. And I always thought this was really cool, so I like to share it with as many people as I can. So in the Bible, right, there's talk of burning coals, right? And every time burning coals were mentioned in the Old Testament, it referred to the presence of God. And
Mhm.
so when we think about scriptures that talk about praying for your enemies and blessing your enemies, for in doing so you'll be heaping burning coals of shame upon their head. It literally says that in the word.
Mhm.
but it completely changes the context, because what you're essentially doing is
Yeah.
heaping the presence of God upon them. And we're thinking we're like doing this, I'm going to get you back kind of
Right,
thing or
right.
something. But that's not it at all. Like once you understand what that meant to the, ancient Jews, now all of a sudden it takes on new meaning. So I think that kind of validates the point that you're trying to make. Until we fully understand that time and that culture in its context, it's going to be really hard to apply it in our current time.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm. Well, I do thank you so much for joining us, Isha Speaks, and I enjoyed your story and the parts of the story that you've been sharing with us. And of course, we definitely want to get to order your book so that we can hear the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey says, and the rest of the story. And get the rest of your story. And I just think that you can inspire so many people, and that you've inspired so many people through your walk with Christ and through your walk in the Word. And as being an ordained minister, there's still a journey for you to go. And I do thank you so much for the contribution that you make to your community in New York. And I know that you are available to come and speak in all different parts of the world,
That's
and
right.
you're international speaker. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and how we can reach you for speaking engagements, and share with us about how we can obtain your book when it becomes available for those
Sure,
that
sure,
wish
sure,
to?
sure. So yes, I am being published with Vine Publishing. That's a Christian publishing company. So I've been working with her for a very long time. She's been very patient. But this is a God book. Like this is not like, I can't just throw it out there. It has to be, there's some deep things. And actually, like recently I felt I heard God say, you have to go deeper. And I'm like, deeper. So, so there's one more layer there. So you can find me on social medias. Isha Speaks on Instagram. Isha Speaks on Facebook, but I really use my regular personal to share just my life. Isha Killian on Facebook, and yeah, that's really how I'm able to be contacted. I definitely respond right away to DMs, and I can be contacted for anything that you would like. I have spoken to um, teen moms at shelters. I have spoken during conferences, online and in person. I've preached as well, and I really like to preach to anyone who has been struggling with the things of life. I always say that no matter what has happened to you, do not let it define you. It does not define you, and it's not going to determine where you're going to go. So I just ask people just to do the work to heal themselves, and ask God to guide you along the way, and you will go on that journey, because life is life in us, right? It's difficult. So we have to take care of ourselves and do the work. So yes, Isha Speaks and Isha Killian on Facebook.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Any final words for you, Dave?
Sorry, I have a lot of background noise. I was trying to get a couple more minutes, a couple seconds out of it. No, so two things. One, if you're watching this and you're struggling with anxiety, mental health, I think that's one major point that we want to take away from this. It's essential to look for help. The future of your life and those around you actually depend on that. So, as somebody who's struggled with that myself, I think it's critical that we take that seriously. And I appreciate what you're doing, Isha, and the support that you provide people that are going through that. Also, just want to encourage you, Isha, hearing your story and being vulnerable and transparent with us and sharing all the things that you've been through, even in your early childhood. That's hard for anyone to deal with. But the first thing I thought is she's not just a survivor, she's a thriver. And so you're getting out there and you're making a positive change despite the pain, despite all the hardships that you've been through. And so that's inspiring to me. And I know that's inspiring to others. If you're going through something or you've been through stuff, and sometimes it's hard to see anything positive coming out of that, but I find that a lot of our passion and purpose is often birthed from the darkest pain and the deepest pain within us from our past. So don't give up hope. Stay encouraged yourself, Isha, and stay encouraged anyone else who's listening to this. There truly is light, especially when you're following God. Anything is possible. So thanks for being
Amen.
with us, Isha.
Amen. Thank you so much, Janelle and David. I really appreciate this time. Hopefully, everyone has been blessed by this time because I have. Thank you.
Yes, it's definitely been a blessing for you to join us this evening for Women's History Month and all that is going on in the world in the month of March. And we do appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate you for being with us this evening because we know on a Friday night you can be anywhere. And I'm so excited being in your presence, and you have graced us with a lot of wisdom and a lot of encouragement. So we do, want people to have this available and have their mental health at the helm of what's possible, and know that, with God, like Dave said, all things are possible. So Isha, thank you so much for joining us this
Thank
evening.
you.
And as we always share, be, do, and have the greatness that you desire, because the greatness is in you. So thank you very much for joining us this evening on Power Fridays Live, and take care and be blessed. We'll be back
All
next
right.
week.
Bye.
Bye.